Long before the world knew him as Pope Leo XIV, Robert Francis Prevost walked quietly through the streets of Peru. He lived a humble life among ordinary people, standing silently near small churches while crowds passed by unnoticed. Hidden inside those quiet years of prayer and service was the extraordinary journey of a man destined to lead the Catholic Church. In January 2004, his mission took him to Cebu in the Philippines. At that time, Robert Francis Prevost was serving as Prior General of the Order of St. Augustine. Despite his high position, he continued living with complete simplicity like an ordinary priest. He spent his days listening to villagers, missionaries, and struggling families. The same quiet hands holding a wooden rosary would one day lead millions of Catholics worldwide. Years later, his humility was revealed during a funeral gathering in Ireland. A stranger spoke casually with him, not knowing he was the worldwide leader of the Augustinian order. Only later did the man realize he had been talking to a future cardinal and pope. In 2014, Robert Francis Prevost was appointed Bishop of Chiclayo in Peru. Even as bishop, he walked quietly among ordinary people in the streets of Peru. To local families, he was never a powerful figure. He was simply their shepherd and friend. No one imagined this humble bishop praying in a small chapel would one day become pope. By 2020, Bishop Prevost had formed a deep bond with the people of northern Peru. He was seen gently blessing an elderly woman during Mass as tears filled her eyes. To the people around him, he was not a future pope, he was family. After becoming a Peruvian citizen, he devoted his life completely to the people of his leadership was built on compassion, kindness, humility, and then came the turning point that changed the course of his life forever. In 2023, he was called to Vatican City for a major new responsibility. He was appointed prefect of the dicastery for bishops. The humble missionary priest now stood near the center, yet he never lost the heart and simplicity of a missionary priest. On the 30th of September 2023, Pope Francis named him a cardinal. Decades of silent service were finally recognized before the world. Cardinal Prevost stood quietly with a calm and thoughtful expression. He seemed to sense an even greater responsibility waiting ahead. By early 2025, uncertainty had spread throughout the Vatican. Pope Francis had grown increasingly weak from illness. Cardinal Prevost remained constantly near the Pope, supporting him quietly. A deeply emotional moment occurred during the Jubilee Mass for the Armed Forces. A weakened Pope Francis warmly greeted Cardinal Prevost before the crowd. Many saw it as a symbolic passing of responsibility. Soon after, Pope Francis's condition worsened and he was hospitalized. Cardinal Prevost led thousands in prayer for the Pope in St. Peter's Square. The night was filled with emotion as candles lit up the square. History was quietly preparing Cardinal Prevost for a greater role. On Palm Sunday, crowds celebrated while Pope Francis grew weaker. The Church was approaching the end of an important era. On the 26th of April 2025, Pope Francis was laid to rest. Cardinal Prevost stood silently grieving his spiritual father. He did not yet know that the same responsibility would soon be his. Silence covered the Vatican in the final hours before the conclave. On the 7th of May 2025, Cardinal Prevost entered St. Peter's Basilica in prayer. No one realized how dramatically his life was about to change. On the 8th of May 2025, white smoke rose above the Sistine Chapel. Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost had been elected the next pope. He would now be known to the world as Pope Leo. The quiet missionary from Peru had reached the highest office in the Church. The humble servant had become the spiritual leader of millions. Celebrations erupted across Peru as people rejoiced in the streets. Families and friends watched emotionally as their former bishop became pope. To the people of Peru, he remained the humble man who walked beside them. They remembered the missionary who served quietly without seeking recognition. On the 18th of May, 2025, Pope Leo XIV he officially began his mission before the entire world. From the dusty streets of Peru to the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, a journey of humility, faith, and silent service had come full circle. The man who walked unnoticed had become the shepherd of the universal church. His story reminds us that true greatness begins in humility, from a simple priest in Peru to the vicar of Christ. Pope Leo XIV, a living example of servant leadership, the church had found a new shepherd rooted in simplicity and love. His election filled the world with hope and inspiration. His life proves that God chooses the humble to lead. This is the story of Robert Francis Prevost, now Pope Leo.